Once, in a lush, green forest, there stood a towering oak tree named Arlo. Arlo was magnificent, with thick, strong branches that reached out like outstretched arms, leaves that shimmered like gold in the sunlight, and a trunk so wide that it could take 10 people holding hands to encircle it. Arlo stood proudly, casting a shadow over the smaller trees and plants beneath him. To Arlo, this grand stature was a reason to boast. He looked down upon every other living thing in the forest, convinced that none could compare to his glory. "I am the mightiest tree here," Arlo would say to the wind that rustled through his leaves. "I stand taller than anyone else, and no one can ever grow as large and powerful as I. Look at me, how splendid I am." The little saplings, the delicate flowers, and the small shrubs that surrounded Arlo tried to engage with him, but he would dismiss them with a flick of his branches or a rude remark. He didn't have time for them. He believed that only his greatness mattered. "Why would I bother with such insignificant beings?" Arlo would grumble when the small birds tried to build nests in his branches. "I deserve the highest honors, and I do not need anyone to bother me with their trivialities." One day, a gentle breeze whispered through the forest, and an old owl named Elda flew down to Arlo's branches. Elda was wise, with feathers as soft as the evening sky and eyes that had seen the passage of many seasons. She had lived long enough to witness the rise and fall of many trees and creatures in the forest. "Arlo," she hooted softly, "you are a mighty oak, but I have seen your pride. It blinds you to the value of others. There is much to learn from every living thing, no matter how small. Perhaps it is time to reflect on your ways." Arlo scoffed at the old owl's words. "Why should I listen to you, old one? What do you know about greatness? You're but a tiny creature compared to me. I am the heart of this forest, and I need no advice from anyone." Elda, with her calm demeanor, simply looked at Arlo and said, "Remember, every tree, every leaf, and every creature has a role in the grand cycle of life. The forest does not thrive because of any one tree alone, but because of all its parts working together in harmony. No one is too small or insignificant." Arlo huffed, his branches rustling in defiance. "I do not need anyone else," he muttered to himself. "I am enough." As the days went by, Arlo's sense of superiority grew. He refused to listen to the gentle rustlings of the smaller trees, who were trying to share their wisdom or offer companionship. He ignored the birds that sang sweet songs of joy and the little squirrels who scurried about, gathering nuts for the winter. But then, a change came. One morning, a fierce storm swept through the forest. The winds howled like wolves, and the rain fell in torrents. Arlo stood tall, trying to weather the storm with all his might. He believed that no force could break him, that he was indestructible. The storm grew fiercer, and soon, Arlo's thick branches were bending dangerously under the weight of the winds and the rain. The smaller trees, those Arlo had always looked down upon, bent low but did not break. The vines that had wrapped themselves around the trunks of the smaller trees seemed to provide strength and support. The saplings, though fragile, swayed with the rhythm of the storm, knowing when to lean with the wind. But Arlo, in his pride, remained rigid, trying to stand as the force of nature raged around him. And then, with a sickening crack, one of his largest branches snapped. The sharp sound echoed through the forest. Arlo screamed in agony as his majestic limb crashed to the ground. His trunk groaned under the strain. In the aftermath of the storm, the once proud oak lay damaged, his massive branch lying in the mud. His leaves were torn, and his once mighty silhouette now appeared fragile and broken. As Arlo struggled to regain his balance, he noticed something that made his heart ache. The smaller trees and the shrubs, the flowers, and the vines had weathered the storm much better. They had all bent with the wind, allowing it to pass by without snapping them in half. The little creatures, the birds, the squirrels, and even the ants, had all found shelter from the storm in the smallest of spaces. It was then that Arlo felt a wave of humility wash over him. He realized that his ego had blinded him to the strength and beauty of the things he had so arrogantly dismissed. He had failed to understand that no matter how grand a tree might be, it was only one part of the forest's great ecosystem. The forest thrived because of the cooperation and balance between all of its inhabitants, big and small. In the days that followed, Arlo began to change. He reached out to the smaller trees, offering them the shelter of his remaining branches. He shared his knowledge of the forest with the young saplings, teaching them how to grow strong and resilient. He even allowed the birds to build nests in his limbs, no longer bothered by their presence. One morning, as Arlo looked around, he noticed the forest had returned to its usual rhythm. The wind was gentle again, and the sun filtered through the leaves, casting dappled light upon the forest floor. He could hear the chirping of birds, the rustling of leaves, and the gentle murmur of the stream nearby. It was a sound of harmony, a sound that he had never truly appreciated before. Elda the owl came by once more, perching on a branch that Arlo had carefully left open for her. "Well, Arlo," she said with a twinkle in her wise old eyes, "I see that you have learned something valuable." Arlo nodded, his branches trembling with newfound humility. "I was wrong to think that I was the only important tree here. I see now that every creature, every plant, every breeze has its role. We are all part of something greater, something beautiful." "Indeed," Elda agreed. "The forest does not thrive because of any one of us, but because we work together, respecting one another's place. No one is too small to make a difference." From that day on, Arlo no longer stood as a solitary figure of pride. He had learned the value of humility, respect, and cooperation. The once proud oak now stood as a symbol of wisdom and unity in the forest, surrounded by trees, animals, and plants who all knew that each of them was equally important in the grand design of nature. And so, Arlo lived the rest of his days not as the mightiest, but as a cherished member of the forest, a tree who had learned that respect for others was the true measure of greatness.